So at root, Icon is defined as classic transportation design revisited in a modern context. Way too many words, or is that good? Okay. If you care about details beyond a pretty picture, and if you do have serious expectations of longevity and true refinement in the drive experience, Icon's the only place to go. I firmly believe that. I've always loved classic cars, but invariably after like 4 or 5 miles of driving them, I quickly am disenchanted by the archaic mechanical realities of them. So as a lifetime tinkerer and car collector, I would find I keep buying that dream model I always wanted, and then, So I originally learned how to restore like concourse, like repeating everything down to the errors of originality. And I found as a designer, as I aged, I wanted to kind of tweak it and do it my way. So at the time when we started Icon, you had Pro Street, you had Street Rod, Hot Rod, Rat Rod, whatever, but everyone kind of was falling into a rut of tradition. And the concept I had was quite simple. What if we just stayed true to the original aesthetic, so the vibe is natural and vintage and like brings all that emotion, but if we could elevate the mechanical experience by not kind of Johnny Cash specialing, adding in little bits and pieces, but take serious engineering control and re-engineer the entire platform to give you the most evolved modern experience. I guess professionally, other than like the stuff I was hacking together in my garage when I tried to still call this a hobby, the first model we did was based on the FJ40, because that was closest to my heart. At that time, I had already been running the TLC brand that specialized in vintage Land Cruiser restorations, classic style. In fact, we were like V8 conversion haters. So after my experience designing and developing the initial pre-production prototypes for Toyota of the FJ Cruiser, it really left me yearning and thinking like, what would that be if I was the only chef in the kitchen? Like, what would that look like? So I took 2 key employees and myself, sequestered us and locked us in a small shop area we had with a killer sound system. We laser scanned an FJ40, rebodied it in aluminum, and we were off to the races. At that point, it was keeping me up at night. And this is a curse of mine where if an idea digs deep enough into me and I can't swat it away anymore, I'll start to build like, instead of counting sheep jumping fences to fall asleep, I'm literally building a CAD 3D model in my head. And I'll tweak and shape and rotate and zoom in and isolate and modify. And I know I have to make it or I'll lose my remaining sanity if past a point it's keeping me up, it's not putting me to sleep. So when we built the first prototype, it was just literally to try and keep my remaining sanity, get it out of my head and physically realize it. But I will say when I finished that first prototype, I was happy with it, but I went back and then added up all the time and money to get there. And I was like, oh, you know, like, what am I gonna do? Are people gonna tolerate this or not? And I asked some people, some consultants, dear friends really, who are more intelligent than I am in branding, and they really helped encourage me and give me the strength to not compromise, not cut corners, because A, I'm not good at that, and if I do that, I'll lose interest quickly. I'm all about the details, and we just kind of went for it. Fortunately, people did jump in, people did engage, and maybe even odder, at this point with Icon's growth, more than 30% of our clients have 2 or more Icon, and it's their fault how expensive they are today because they further enabled me to go, well, you know, what if you had Brembo brakes? What if we had this capability, this utility, that option? So it's been a dream because no compromise, keep pushing the limits, keep trying to innovate, come up with new stuff, but avoid superfluous content that will kind of define its date of obsolescence, because there's enough of that stuff in the world. The FJ40 still to this day has a special place for me. I've always loved the early Broncos and have a lot of memories with them. The Thrift Masters, that's our third production model based on the 47 to 53 Chevy. And then our one-off freaks and geeks, we call the Derelicts and Reformers. They're so creative and like singular, I like to think of them as high-functioning sculptures. And I think the 65 F-250 crew cab that we built is certainly high on my list of favorites. And we're just wrapping up a 300 SEL Mercedes long wheelbase derelict that is so off the hook. And like the minutia and crazy re-engineering and redesign we did, but purposely extremely under the radar, to the point that like unless you've owned one for a decade, you're gonna miss 90% of what's going on there. That one's my current favorite. There is a temptation to constantly evolve to the latest perversion of modernity. But like for me, for example, 10, 12 umpteen speed transmissions. At the end of the day, you just have more shifts. It's not any faster. It's really the OEMs trying to meet emission standards by keeping the motor in a very specific sweet spot in the power curve. But for the user, the difference in fuel consumption is trivial. And now it's like shift, 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 shift. So I'm kind of old school. Like I stick to 4-speed overdrive, built like a tank, will last forever tranny. That pretty much anywhere in 100,000 miles or whatever, when your tranny needs to be rebuilt, pretty much any shop you're gonna limp into is gonna go, oh hell yeah, I've done these for years, boom, and they knock it out and it's solid. I've caught a lot of grief over the years for putting LSs in the Land Cruisers, but the reality is the reliability, parts availability, longevity, all the evities of the LS platform, you cannot argue with. Everywhere can service it. Any technician with a brain and a generic scan tool can figure his way around it, and clients, because we distribute globally, can always source the parts for them. And they're really just, they're hard. If you look at it from a practical sense, it's an excellent solution. And the network, because they've been so popular, people have been putting them where they don't belong for many, many, many decades. So the network of suppliers that have created niche solutions, if it's for a Fiat, front engine accessory drive package, through to controller networking or transmission control, transfer case adaptation, how to read when in low range versus high range and adapt the performance metrics, power curve for truck versus car. Every solution is available, and that network continues to evolve and grow. So I still think the LS is the go-to solution. Yeah, I have absolutely no degrees or proper training. Fortunately, Raymond Loewy's fault, who's one of my heroes as a designer, he made up the term industrial designer. So I'm like, okay, just a couple years ago, I'm like, yeah, all right, I'm an industrial designer. So I used to be very self-conscious that I don't have degrees, didn't go to art center, didn't get an MBA or whatever it is. But honestly, the older I get and the more well-received I am in this industry, I am now super stoked that I did not get conventional training. For better or worse, I followed my passions. That could be a 5-year deep dive in traditional arts and crafts style fumed quarter sawn white oak woodworking or leathercraft. I've studied pre-Raphaelite painting. I've done deconstructive and constructive sculpting. I've taken mechanics courses. I've taken night classes at Art Center, night classes at USC, UCLA. And I think that Maverick perspective has helped me hold true to my perspective. And I'm always preaching that to young people or anyone who will listen. Respect your perspective. If you have a defined opinion, that is what made you unique in the world in the first place. And that's the more you respect that, the more pure and unique I think your product is going to be. But it's also critical to understand what you enjoy doing / might be decent at, and what you hate doing, therefore are going to suck at. So I'm all about building a village, having a team. If it was just me running this, I would have bankrupted this a year ago because I'd still be prototyping my brains out. Traditionally, we run a staff of roughly 50. We have dedicated build crews for each production line. So there's a team leader and then a team. All the guys are certified in set phases of our build manuals for each platform, and then we'll cross-train them, cross-educate the managers. Then there's a shop foreman. Then there's my wife and I, and there's Sharif. So we run sort of the business side of it, and I do product planning and design and sales and marketing, and we all wear a lot of hats. Specifically, we have an electrical engineer and we have a design engineer, but I will do a rough sketch, and my team's worked with me for so long, I kind of don't even need to do that anymore. I can go to our DE, ME, or EE and just sort of air sketch and a little more surface tension. I want it like this, but like that. Remember when we did that, a little bit of that, but more of this. People like me are never 100% happy. There's always something. I've had to grow to understand and respect where to draw that line, because at the end of the day, it has to be a proper business. I think the critical thing there is the magnificent and diverse team of craftsmen that are here that are proud of their work, down to our key suppliers, and understand that threshold and what that needs to be. So even the guys that like build out the Broncos and the FJs, they're the first ones to take it home and drive it. So there's pride and there's ownership, and it keeps us all really connected. I have somehow managed to avoid having a real job my entire career. At this point, I'm purely unemployable, I'm sure. But I just want to say thank you to the community for embracing us. And that can be consumers who can tolerate our price point. That of equal value is people that appreciate and respect and spread the word of what we do, even if our price point to them is just stupendous. The respect for the art of what we do has been such an honor. And suppliers jumping in, like you guys, to really understand that last bit of refinement we're looking for in the performance or the detail of a product. Having the trust and faith and commitment, because I'm not going to impress you with my output, you know, oh, I'm going to buy 30 this year. It's not like, you know, I'm some OEM and like I'm going to give you such a rev model that you're going to make sense of it by the numbers. It's by the passion. It's about a joint understanding of quality and pushing the limits and evolving that has enabled us to get to where we are, and gosh knows where in the future. Come on, you got to do just a little bit of HP horn, right? Just subtle, right? Was that? Okay.